And good evening and welcome to that lovely moment of the evening where I've thrown myself off the cliff and there's nothing I can do to stop what happens next. How are you? Welcome to the second of 4 events as part of the first ever Ricochet Book Club Christmas Festival. If you missed last night's one, it was fantastic. It was so worth your time. It was the poetry event last night on Monday. You'll find it on the Shelf Analysis YouTube channel. You'll also find details of it here in the Ricochet Book Club as well. We had 3 wonderful poets on last night: Martin Dyer, Sarah Clancy, and Chandrika Narayan and Mohan, all doing their own work and then performing work from other people as well. A few technical problems, which we won't have tonight because I'm absolutely sure that that's how it works. But if you missed last night's episode, you can check it out on the Shelf Analysis YouTube channel, where you're watching here, essentially. It'll be there. Just poke a load of buttons and you'll find it eventually. This is night 2 of 4. So just to give you the heads up, that coming a little bit later on in the week, there is some stuff I want you to keep an eye out for. Let's go with this one here first. That's the one I'm looking for. There we go. See, if I press buttons, things will happen. Tomorrow night, it's just me. I'm going to be on screen for the entire time tomorrow night. If you think you can stomach it, it's our inaugural book quiz. As I mentioned last night, over the course of the weekend, Liz and I sat and wrote questions and got squiffier and squiffier and squiffier as we did it. So the later rounds may be a little bit more ramshackle than the earlier ones. There will be no winners. There will be no losers. We will have spot prizes, though, throughout the course of the evening, with thanks to our friends at Eason's and Rascals Brewing as well. So if you fancy a little bit of that, tomorrow night, the book quiz. And again, it's just for fun. You don't need a team. You just need you and a pen and a piece of paper and write down your own answers. And we'll have some fun. That is tomorrow night live at 8 o'clock here as well. If you're watching for the final one on Thursday night, Thursday night's event is the Christmas party, or the closest we can come to having one. 4 guests on the night are going to be Colm O'Regan, Darren Griefa, Liz Nugent, and Donal Ryan, all talking about their years and all reading some of their own work. That's the Christmas party. That's happening Thursday night at 8 o'clock here as well. Really briefly, and because I feel like I have to, and because I think I'd like to, it is the Christmas appeal. It continues. It is in aid of our friends at the DSPCA, Samaritans Ireland, and the Peter McVerry Trust as well. I'll have a quick look. Hang on. Current total is €21,483, which is good. It's a start. Ideally, I'd like to raise a lot more than that. It continues until the 31st of December. All we ask is that you consider donating the price of a book. If you've enjoyed the book club during the year, you've enjoyed any of the shelf analysis videos, anything else that we've done, these are 3 incredibly worthy charities that do a lot of fantastic work throughout the course of the year. So consider throwing us a few quid. The link is at the very bottom of the page here, as you can see it. If you fancy giving us a few quid, and it's really simple. It is bit.ly/ricochet appeal. You'll find the details of it on all of my socials as well. If you want to go and have a look at Instagram or Twitter or in the Ricochet Book Club as well, that is there. I don't think there's anything else I want to do, primarily because foolishly, or maybe less than foolishly, my 3 wonderful guests tonight were the 3 first people I thought of when I thought, I'd like to have a chat with some people about the books that they loved in 2020 and the books that they would like to recommend to you as well. So I stuck out a bunch of emails, and the first 3 people went, yep. And as a result of which, they are literally a team tonight, genuinely. And I can see them on screen immediately below here, just getting, you know, slightly brighter and slightly more. So I'm just going to press this button here, first of all, which in theory will get me Jan Carson. Hello, Jan Carson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Rick?
I'm fantastic. And hello to Sinéad Gleeson. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
And Ronán Hession. Evening to you as well.
Hi, Rick. How you doing?
It's been strange in that, like, we've all done this during the year so far. We've all done shelf analysis, but the idea of us all kind of maybe coming together to see what we liked during the year, and more importantly, to see what sort of backgrounds you've come up with. Jan, you've got an entire Christmas tree. I've managed one piece of tinsel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're out showing all of us. This is distressing, frankly. Have you been doing that for all of your calls and all of your events, or is it just something special that you've decided for this tonight?
It's been up since November, but I've only just worked out how to angle the screen so you can actually see it. So it was a bit of a waste of a Christmas tree until about 2 days ago, and now it's here in all its glory.
Sinead, the usual sagging bookshelves behind you as well. Are they getting any better than they were last time? How are they?
No, they're getting no better. I'm gearing up to eventually replace them. But this is the place in the house where there won't be other people shouting. So it's kind of it's tucked away from everybody else. So this is the quietest part of the house, which is why I'm here. So
that's always a crucial one. And Ronán, you said earlier on that you just had to go downstairs and kick the entire family off Xbox. And
yeah, so for the first time since lockdown, they're having to talk to each other and, make some memories. I hope at least that much will come out of the evening.
I'm going to start just before we get into the books, and I've asked everybody to choose 5. I realize what an impossible task that is when you guys all read the amount that you do throughout the course of a year, but we'll see what kind of criteria that you've chosen for as well. But maybe for those people who didn't see the earlier shelf analysis episodes, maybe just talk to us a little bit about how your year has been and gone, and kind of where you are in the headspace you're in right now at the end of 2020. Jan, maybe you first.
Yeah, I think I just hit a wall. I did quite well in the first lockdown because productivity is kind of my coping mechanism, and I've just run out of energy now. So I feel like I'm in hibernation mode at the minute, just reading under a blanket, which maybe that's not a bad way to end the year.
I had a conversation today. It's not going out until Christmas Day, but it's part of the book show Christmas special with Elaine Feeney and Mike McCormick. And both of them, Mike McCormick is all for the idea of having a lockdown for 3 months of every year. His idea is we just hibernate. We should be allowed to do it, particularly when the weather is good as well, and not when the weather is terrible. And we should just have a few months off every year where we can just go, nope, this is me just rebooting. Sinead, tell us about you and how you're getting on at the moment.
I'm getting on good. I should point out that the last time I was on a Zoom with you, you told me a big fat fib in that I thought I was just talking to you about something generally, and you told me I'd won a prize. So hopefully you don't have any things you're going to pull on me tonight. Yeah, like everybody, it's been, I think everyone's had a tough year. It's been a tiring kind of year. I wasn't as productive. I think my children were home, probably the same for Ronán. But I think when they went back to school, I got my head down and I got a lot done. But yeah, I think we're all just a bit weary. It's a bit Groundhog Day, isn't it? And yet we all, we have a home and there's loads of good things in our lives, but I'm a bit weary about the whole thing now. But back into reading again, which is I took a bit of a hit during the year, a bit of a slump. I was reading too many things, and then I was reading short things and reading poetry, and now I kind of found my feet again, I think, thankfully.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been through exactly that thing of stumbling and eventually managing to make it through. What I do like is that the people may have seen the video of me giving you the prize for the Doyle Literary Awards this year, where I Zoom called you ostensibly to interview you about being one of the finalists, and then just jumped it on you on screen. What everybody didn't really see was that immediately afterwards I drove over to your house and I gave you the award while we sat in your front garden, which was that would have been a nice video too, and we didn't shoot any of that.
I'm just glad you cut out the bit where my language got a little bit more colourful. That was edited out. So yeah, thanks for that.
That was, I would have left that one in. That was nothing to do with it. Ronán, tell me about you and about how 2020 is finishing out for you.
Yeah, well, my day job, I'm a civil servant in Department of Social Protection. So since March, we just faced the sort of avalanche of the sort of effect really of the pandemic. So we've been really busy trying to just help people as much as we can through that. And I've really just ploughed on with writing in the evenings and trying to do reading has been a real sort of life raft for me, I think, this year. I think it's been something I have. When I think back throughout my life, it's always been there for me. And this year, it really was. Like, I can certainly relate. I've had to sort of switch gears in reading. And I think a lot of people have read more poetry this year. I think there's just something, you get the nourishment without the sort of level of, concentration necessarily. You can really just let it sort of do its magic on you. So I've had, and it's exposed me. I've got involved in through various Zoom events and so on. I've learned so much more about the writers that are out there, people I'd never heard of before, people I've heard read before who I'd never heard, and their writing makes more sense to me now. I've heard them read it, and so overall, it's been it'll probably take me a decade to absorb what's happened this year. But for now, it just sort of feels like I'm ready to, wrap myself up in wrapping paper and just sit under the tree for 2 weeks.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I'm with you on small books as well. Like Max Porter's new book arrived in the post this morning, The Death of Francis Bacon. It's this big. It's beautiful and tiny. And I had that moment of going, oh, praise the Lord. I mean, you know, there are some people who bring out 750-page plus anthologies in a year like this of brilliant short stories. They're not doing us any favors, frankly, are they, Sinead?
What I will tell you is that 3 Art of the Glimpse is the perfect height to put your laptop on. So
is that what you're doing right now?
Going on here, yeah.
That's another question I've never asked. What is everybody doing to prop up their laptop? I have Inside North Korea, Henri Cartier-Bresson, The Man, the Image, and the World. I have an Egon Schiele book, and I have Mapping the Studio. So I've about 5 fairly hefty-sized art books. Jan, Ronán?
I've got my 2020 diary, and let's just say it's the only thing it's been useful for this year, propping up the laptop.
And Ronán, what's your laptop sitting on?
It's sitting on a saggy bunch of reports that I keep saying I'm going to read for work. So they're 9-month-old ESRI reports about obscure parts of the labour market that one day I will read.
I obviously, neither of you guys have had a book out of the year. I am going to make honourable mention before I get into any of the books this year that I would have brought in the Art of the Glimpse. It is sitting, it's immediately beside my bed inside. And it's one of the more extraordinary things I've read this year. And I don't think I've had a proper conversation face-to-face with you about it, Sinead. It is something that I knew a lot of the work in it already, but there are so many writers in it whose work I have never read before. There are writers in it who I'd never heard of before, and each one of them is proving to be an absolute gem. And for those people who are looking for a present for the people in their lives who just love reading and writing and books, it's the one to grab this year. You've gotten a lot of really positive feedback on it, haven't you?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I love anthologies. I buy them all the time. I have anthologies from all over the world, and the thing about an anthology becomes a sort of way of taking the temperature in a way. But then as soon as you put it out, you know, or you've had it commissioned and you decided what's in it, you know, so the work had to be published. So, you know, for example, I know Ronán's published short stories since then, and there's a chance if it had been published before I'd finished the book, you know, maybe the next time Ronán will be in another anthology. And that's the thing, like there's so much new work coming out of Ireland. It's almost when all these anthologies that Head of Zeus do, they're always 100, and that kind of seems like a daunting figure, but in fact it went up to 100 very quickly, and you could put 200, you could put 300 Irish writers in there. So it's just a matter of trying to give people a range of genres, older stories, newer writers, and make it a bit more diverse as well. So yeah, there's something for everybody. Nobody will ever like old stories in every anthology. So, but hopefully there'll be enough to keep people.
I am 180 odd pages in. The only thing I didn't finish was the Beckett story. The Beckett is impossible to me. Samuel Beckett was, I know. Just made me go, no, I can't. I don't have the energy for it. And everything else now has been extraordinary.
That's allowed.
Thank you to Chandrika and Narayana Mohan. She was on last night as one of our poets. She says, will the internet spontaneously combust with this many sound people on one screen? That's a good way to start a gig. Well done. Thank you to Emily Reynolds, who says the Art of the Glimpse is fantastic, an amazing feat of work by Sinead. If you'd like to drop us a comment, either if you're watching in Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, you can do it in comments on either. I haven't really thought of a structure. We have 5 books, so maybe if each of us starts with 2, and we'll go 2, 2, 2, and 2, and then we'll kind of work it up from there. So Jan, just because you're in that box there, you're in that celebrity square, you get to start. What are you going to pick for us?
I am going to start with Marianne Lee's A Quiet Tide, which I read quite early in lockdown. I'd hoped to read it actually before, but it got pushed back in my to-be read pile. This year during lockdown, I just really fell in love with story again, and very simple novels that just captivate you with characters and stories. This is about it's based on a real life botanist called, I'm going to read her name so I don't mix it up, Ellen Hutchins, who lived down around Bantry, and she was one of the first female botanists in the world, and the first female botanist definitely in Ireland. It's historical fiction, but which I don't usually love, but I was so captivated by this. I got lost in it, and I spent a whole weekend in bed reading it pretty much in one go. It's a quiet book, like the title suggests, but really gently disarming. So if you want something, this is a perfect Christmas read. You could curl up with it on Boxing Day and Christmas Day and just lose yourself. Nice glass of wine. I think you'll really enjoy this. So Quiet Tide is my first one.
Okay.
completely at the other end of the spectrum. I don't know if I would say I enjoyed this book. It disturbed me immensely, but it was definitely one of the books which stayed with me for the longest this year. Marek Lucas-Reinfeldt's The Discomfort of Evening, which is translated by Michelle Hutchins. So it's a Dutch book. It's set in a dairy farm. It's about a young girl who a very disturbing thing happens at the start of the novel, and it just gets more and more and more disturbing from there. If you like repressed Protestant culture, dairy cows, little bit of some dodgy shenanigans in the family as well. It's one of the darkest things I've ever read, but it's also one of the most powerfully written things that I read this year, and it haunted me in the truest sense. Like, I had strange dreams after this book. It won the Booker International this year, and it's definitely it's probably one of the books I'll remember for the longest from 2021, but probably not a comfortable Christmas read. Maybe save this for kind of a dark night by yourself.
We don't mind if they're not comfortable. That's perfectly fine. Celebrity Square number 2 then is Ronán, down below Jan. Where are you going to start, Ronán?
Thanks. Actually, before I start, my wife bought me The Discomfort of Evening as one of the books for our wedding anniversary, believe it or not. She bought me one of the books, so it's causing me to reevaluate things live on air. First one, and I just look at the chat, like to dedicate this to all the lads at the ESRI. Love what you do. And this is by Baeswa. She's a Korean writer, and it's translated by Deborah Smith, called Untold Night and Day. And it's a stunning cover. And really, the reason I picked this is when I sort of closed my eyes and thought, which book did I read early on in the year that's sort of still in there? And this was it. So actually, it's only a short book, not quite Max Porter short, but it's 150 pages or so. I reread it over the weekend. I'm still not really sure what it's about. It's the kind of book you either have to really concentrate or else you just dream your way through it. Mm-hmm. So both times I've just dreamed my way through it. And it's about a woman who works in a closing down theater who's going around town with her director. She's only acted once. And what happens is that there's all these shifts in perception and sort of almost in a sort of quantum physics sort of way. Reality keeps changing and the same incidents keep happening, but to different people, or the people who happens to keep switching. That's a terrible sales pitch, but it's the kind of book that I think is very refreshing. It's like looking at a piece of modern art or something where you can't bring your normal mind, your normal reading mind to it. So it kind of reprograms you a bit. So I think it's a really, and it's actually not a difficult read. I'm making it sound like it's going to be a real pain to try and keep track of it, but it's actually really, I found it actually quite a smooth book to read. I think that's partly thanks to the really good translation. This next one, number 2, is by Percival Everett, called I Am Not Sidney Poitier. And it's about a young man called Not Sidney Poitier. And he goes through his whole life. He's a young black man who drops out of college and decides for some reason to drive around the most racist parts of the southern states of America, to the mutual bewilderment of both parties. And I think it's probably the funniest book I've read this year. He's widely published in the US. This is the first time I think he's been published in the UK by Influx Press, and they're publishing another one of his books, possibly even 2 of his books next year. And he's really highly rated. He's a very cavalier attitude. He's a character in his own books. He's sort of an incompetent professor, Percival Everett, in his books, and it's just a really funny and interesting book. And a writer, I think I'll probably, every time one of his books comes out, I'll buy it. That's all for me.
Sounds amazing. Sinead, where are you going to begin?
Well, it's really hard to pick 5. It's a terrible kind of question to ask of us, Rick. It's just awful. But I want to start with something Irish, and I think that this year was an incredible year for Irish books. I loved a lot of stuff. Patrick Frayne, Elaine Feeney, Liz Nugent's book, Keelan Hughes, Alice Lyons. There was just so much good stuff published. And I picked this book because I'm showing you the wrong cover. I'm showing you the UK cover, but you really should buy the Irish publisher version, which is Cathy Sweeney's collection, Modern Times. I'd been following her stories for a very long time. A lot of them were published in the Stinging Fly, who published her collection in Ireland. And they're very, very short. They're very comic. They're very strange. There's one story, there's a woman who has too many mouths. There's another one who brings cover the children's ears if they're listening, her husband's cock in a lunchbox to work every day because she misses it. There's a couple who have an electric chair and they give each other shocks. So strange and surreal in a kind of Leonora Carrington, maybe Daisy Johnson sort of way, bit of Lydia Davis. But I absolutely love these. One of Kathy's stories is in The Art of the Glimpse as well. My second choice is a novel, and again, I'm a big fan of novels that are small, quiet, not a whole lot going on in them novels. And this was a book by a press that, when you get completist about a publisher, you want everything they put out is amazing. This is by Daunt Books. This novel is called Indelicacy by Amina Khan. And it's about a woman who's a cleaner and she works in a gallery and she wants to write about art. And she said, I'm not the kind of person that they let speak about art. But she wants to write, and she eventually gets married. And the book is a very interior, small book. There's literally her husband, her friend. She walks around a lot. She's in her own head an awful lot. But it's just so beautiful. Like Jenny Offal, Claire Louise, Megan Hunter, people like that have all been big fans of this book. It's very quiet, but it reminded me a lot of The White Book by Han Kang, which is one of my favorite books. So it's just a beautiful, studied, gorgeous book. And then Daunt just published it. They just did Vivian Gornick's essays, another Italian essayist, Natalia Ginsburg. They published her as well. And Brandon Taylor, who's on the Booker shortlist for his novel. But I loved it. A strange book where not much happens, but it's tonally and atmospherically, it just blew me away.
I already want all 6 books that all of you have been speaking about. And also, finally, after 57, 59 episodes of this, somebody starts talking about human penises. Finally, it's taken a while, and now we're finally here. Before I get to my first 2, it's a great idea. The wonderful Kat Hogan, hi Kat, who's watching tonight, says, I'm doing 100 days of Art of the Glimpse starting on Christmas Day. Would anybody care to join me? It seems from the comments already, a lot of people would like to join her in that. Kat, I'm about 18 stories in, so I'm perfectly happy to join in on that one. She's starting a hashtag. The hashtag is 100 Days of Art of the Glimpse. We'll keep you rolling on that one. Okay. I'm like you, Ronán, I have a particular interest in stuff from Japan and from South Korea as well. So when I came across this earlier this year, firstly, the cover is beautiful. This is Cho Nam-ju's Kim Ji-young, born 1982. Having done some back reading about the book, it's a book that was the only million-selling book in South Korea in the last decade. It's one of these books that started conversations at a national political level as well, but it's an incredibly simple story. It is about Kim Ji-young. She is born in 1982, and she lives her life. It is about her life as a child, her life as a young woman, her life when she becomes married, and what it is that means within the structure of Korean society at the time. So ultimately, this is a book about how women were treated in South Korea from the mid-1980s right the way up to almost the present day, but told within this small glimpse of this one woman's life. It is very beautifully told. It is quite a relatively speaking, a short tome. It's only 160 odd pages long, and it has an emotional heft that I think you don't normally get from 162-page books, and it will make you feel a little bit angry by the time you get to the end of it. I haven't seen enough people talking about it, and actually that's the criteria for my 5. I didn't pick my favorite 5 books of the year. I decided to pick 5 books that I think deserve a little bit more spotlight because I love them so much and they didn't get enough as far as I was concerned. So that's my first one. That's Kim Ji-young. I'll do that one more time. Born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju is the name of the author, and that is on Scribner. This as well. Why was everybody not talking about Emer McBride's Strange Hotel for the entire year? I read this at the tail end of 2019 when it came in a proof copy. I remember coming away slightly hypnotized by it. So it may or may not be autofiction. It's about an author who is traveling from hotel room to hotel room to hotel room, as the author herself may or may not be traveling from hotel room to hotel room to hotel room. There isn't a single line of dialogue in the entire book, which gives it this weirdly strange quality. It is Emer McBride, so it's written beautifully. I came out of it feeling like I'd read something that had the heft of something that was about 800 pages long. Again, despite the fact that it's absolutely tiny. I was convinced this was going to be one of those books that was going to make enormous waves this year. Again, maybe because of the year that's in it, maybe because of everything else that came out, it got slightly lost, and I don't think it deserved to. So if you in any way have loved Emer McBride's work before now, or even if you haven't and you'd like somewhere to dip in, this is a nice place to start. It's called Strange Hotel, which I'm absolutely sure, although nobody has confirmed, is a reference to a Bob Dylan song, and that's by Emer McBride, and that is my number 2 of my 5. Back to Celebrity Square number 1. Jan, what have you got?
Do you want us to do two or?
Yeah, do two more. Yeah.
Okay, I am going to go a little bit off the fiction track now. I'm going to recommend this book, which I know a lot of people have enjoyed this year, Sarah Baum's Handiwork. I can't work out which way's left and right on screen tonight.
You're doing real well.
So I actually read this right at the start of lockdown when my anxiety levels were through the roof, and it just felt like such a tonic. It's a non-fiction book about craft, art, writing, kind of almost a meditation in some ways. It's a slim little book as well, and there's a lot of white space in it. And it's not something that you would sit down and read in a whole go. You just sort of dip in for choice little nuggets, and then you think about it for the rest of the day. And knowing Sarah, there's so much of her in it. I just love her honesty. So there are lots of parts where she talks about kind of the all-consuming everythingness of being an artist, and then just the other days you have when you're like, meh, art, what's the point in that? And so I find it a really reassuring book, and a book that I feel like it should have got an awful lot more attention as well, probably the same as Emer McBride. So I bought it for quite a few people for Christmas. So apologies, spoiler there for everyone who's getting it for Christmas. The other book that I picked for this section is poetry, Rachel Long, My Darling from the Lions. I've known Rachel for quite a wee while, and I have been so excited about this book. Every time I saw her, I was like, when is the collection coming out? I don't always love poetry, but this is poetry like story, which is something that really appeals to me. There's a lot about her childhood in it. There's a lot about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a Black woman, and a lot of humour, and also a real sort of magic realist slant at places. So whenever I listen to Rachel read, it always makes all of these little kind of thoughts go off up here, like explosive little ideas for stories and things. And this collection is very much like this. It's done quite well, but I feel like a lot more people should pick this up and read it. Particularly, there's a poem about Barbies in it, which is just fantastic. So I'd recommend this, even if you're not a big poetry fan. This is a great wee collection. And I will pass down to Ronán below me now.
Maybe I do like that. Just before you do that, if people are on Instagram, they can follow Sarah. She's Sarah of the Bounds, I think, on Instagram, and it's all of her artwork as well. And again, it's strangely calming and strangely wonderfully soothing. And again, that's another one of the books out from Tramp Press this year, along with During the Grief is A Ghost in the Throat, which to all intents and purposes is the best book of 2020. I'm conscious I'm not going to mention a lot of the ones I thought were amazing as well, the Donal Ryans and Kevin Barrys and Liz Nugent's and stuff of this world. But sorry, I ruined your hand over there. That was it. Do you want to try it one more time, Jan? Do the hand down one more time, because that was.
I'm going to pass down to Ronán.
Thank you for raining those good vibes from upstairs, Jan. So yeah, like everyone else, I just sort of thinking of the books that made an impression in me, and perhaps, in a different year would have found a bigger readership. So this is one that I think did get in the translation world anyway. Breast and Eggs by Miko Kakami. It's translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. So this was originally published as a novella called Summer Story. And it won the equivalent of the sort of Booker in Japan, which tends to go to novellas. And then it was sort of, she worked on it for another 10 years, rewrote the first half, worked on it for another 10 years to write a second section 10 years later. And it basically explores the position of an unmarried single woman who wants to explore her relationship with having children over the course of that period of time. And it does, I think, what a novel I think is particularly handy for as a form is talking about the individual, talking about society, and talking about the individual in society. And I think it shows a society, Japanese society, that I think is not really, it certainly doesn't appear much in modern Japanese literature. If you look at some of the Japanese novels of the 70s, they would have talked a lot about the position of women in society. Modern novels, the more popular ones that get into translation, haven't emphasized that as much. So it really was an education for me as a man anyway, and in terms of understanding Japanese society. And if you're a single woman, you can't adopt a child, you can't get IVF, anything like that. So, but she allows lots of time, kind of the opposite of what you were saying about Emer McBride. This is a long book that feels like a short book. So, you know, it explores a lot of things, and it allows the space. There's been some criticism that it's too digressive, but I like the fact that they're just chapters where they just talk things through, you know, different characters, different perspectives. So that was a really, early on when I read that, I thought this is going to be there. If Rick O'Shea sends me an email at the end of the year where I get to get on Zoom with the big guns, I'm bringing this with me. I'm packing this in my parachute. This is one I read recently, and I actually did a review of it recently. You can see I don't normally tab books, but these are all some of the lines I liked. You can see them. Civil Servant in me comes out. It's called The Fig Tree by Goran Vojnovic, who's a Slovenian writer, and it's translated by Olivia Helliwell. And this is from a publisher called Istros Books. If anyone, one of the best kept sort of secrets, well, it's not really a secret, but in contemporary literature, is the quality of sort of Balkan literature. And Istros Books specialize in that. They've been publishing for 10 or 15 years now, consistently high quality. And if anyone like me was influenced by Eileen Battersby's writing about international fiction, and she really turned me on to it. She was a huge champion of Istros. And this book is a fantastic, it's only just out, so it may sort of, you know, disappear and all the sort of Christmas stuff, but it tells the story of 3 generations from 1955 up until more or less the present day. It's based in Slovenia, but of course, 1955, you know, you're talking about different countries. You're talking about the breakup of Yugoslavia. And it's particularly about a guy who's trying to establish his own identity. He's disconnected from his father. He's disconnected from his wife. And he's trying to establish who he is at a time when all his reference points are falling apart. And it's a beautiful exposition of that. It's a really thoughtful book. It's beautifully written. And it's just an absolute gem. And I think this will be on a lot of lists. Maybe it will or won't, but it deserves to be recognized and get a wide readership, and I really hope it does. So anyway, once more for the camera. I'll just pass this into Sinead. Here you go, Sinead.
Going the wrong way.
It's
like it's my kind of thriller dance routine there. I you know, it's funny. I love Miako's book as well, Ronán, and My Darling from the Lines, and Emer McBride's book. I knew that we'd all intersect, and Sarah Baum's Handiwork, I think, is one of the books of the year. Also, I forgot to mention Actress by Anne Enright. I think on a sentence level, there's no Irish writer like her for what she's able to do on the page. Anyway, next choice, I decided, because I read a lot of poetry this year, I would pick a book of poetry. And, you know, I'm sure all of us find a lot of the books we like because somebody mentioned something on Twitter, or you see a snapshot of somebody's taking a photo of something. And I love finding work like that. And this was one of these things, even though this book had won the Ondaatje Prize this year and the T.S. Eliot Prize last year. It's called A Portable Paradise by Roger Robinson. And it's just, I came across it because there was a poem called Grace, which is about a nurse. He had his son was very sick when he was a baby, and he spent a lot of time in hospital. So there's a lot of poems in this book about hospital spaces and nurses, which I'm interested in. But also it's a lot about race, and there's a lot of pieces in this about Grenfell and the effect of race and class and Grenfell, and then the Windrush generation. So it's it's a very small book, and yet he covers a lot of very big topics. And when I saw that poem Grace, I remember posting it, and Tracy Thorne said, "Oh, I'm going to buy that book, having read the poem," which is what I did. And I love when that kind of happens. People kind of see it. But there was a line in it where he talks, and the nurse is called Grace, and she's trying to put a line into his son, and she says, putting a line into my son's nylon thread of a vein, which is just an image that's never left me. And again, it's a beautiful People Tree Press. It's a very small press who publish a lot of writers of color. And I just loved this collection. It's really heartbreaking, but really political and powerful too. My next book, Ronán will be delighted to see, is a piece of translation. And this is, again, a press and a writer. You know, when you get really completist about something, you want to read everything by them. And everything that this publisher publishes, I devour. It's a British publisher called Fitzcarraldo. All their fiction is done in blue. All their non-fiction is done in white. And I think this writer, Annie Ernaux, this is a book from this year called A Girl's Story, which is her looking back. She writes, this is non-fiction, but she kind of writes this auto-fictional accounts of her life that some people think of as novels, and some people think of like more biographical hybrid work. And this is about a time in her life that she's looking back to her first kind of sexual encounters in 1950s at a strange camp, summer camp she goes to. And she doesn't realize how much of an impact it has on her, because it wasn't very good, and it impacted her relationship with men all through her life. But she tends to write books, like all good writing that's non-fiction. It's not about one thing. So she's writing about French politics, she's writing about being a woman, she's writing about family, gender, money, all of these things. It's translated by Alison Strayer. She wrote a book called Happening, which is about trying to obtain an abortion in France when it was illegal. She's written a book recently about her father. So she tends to kind of go very, it's a very big view on almost, she kind of narrows in on something, but I think she's an exquisite kind of writer. And I think this, and my other product placement favorite nonfiction book of the year was Strangers, a collection of essays published by McKenna Books, small press, Rebecca Tamat, who was just, it's kind of eco-poetic about Anna Mendieta, the land, magic stones, the environment, politics. Yeah, just really brilliant. There was too many books this year, Rick. This is the problem.
That was so subtle. We almost missed that product placement. You did need to point that out. You needed to be.
I realized it camouflages into the dress as well, so I did miss that. Yeah.
We got a couple of comments already. Thank you to Katie Moten, who says, I'm putting Strange Hotel on my list as well. Hello, Eleanor Hooker. Eleanor, how are you? Love the recommendations so far. Indelicacy sounds fascinating, going on my to-read list. Trina Marina Grady says, I feel like a sugar-starved child in a sweet shop, as you do. And I've just noticed our numbers have jumped up. So hello to everybody who was watching Edna O'Brien, because that was a much better idea tonight, watching her deliver the T.S. Eliot lecture. And now you've come to us for the after party. You're in the right place. I'm going to go for my next one with this. This came out this year, and I know that Sinead loves this too. This is Olivia Laing's Funny Weather, Art in an Emergency. This is the opposite of like a little thin little something for you to just, dip into. This is both beautifully produced. Look at that. I mean, just, the cover on this book. This is something that is strokeable. If you like Olivia Laing's nonfiction work, if you read things like The Lonely City, this might appeal to you. It's mostly her art writings. It's things she's written for magazines like Freeze. There are essays in here on David Bowie and Jean-Michel Basquiat and people who are of that ilk. There's interviews that she's done with people too, Hilary Mantel. And then there's just stuff she has written about art and the arts in general. And her writing is so incredibly persuasive and beautiful. I've just finished actually today. She writes about him, David Wojnarowicz, who I hope I'm pronouncing right. She wrote so much about him in The Lonely City and in this about Close to the Knives, his autobiography. I went out, bought it, and only just finished it yesterday. And she was right. It's damn good. And it's a fine piece of work, not from 2020, and he passed away many years ago, but it's well worth your time. This is for the art lover in your life. And if you like somebody who really is incredible at getting across what art is, but in the form of words, which is not the easiest thing to do, particularly when it's visual art that she's dealing with a lot. There's that. So that's Olivia Laing's Funny Weather, Art in an Emergency. And she has a new book due out in 2021 as well. Also, I didn't think there was enough love for Rob Doyle's Threshold this year. I do not want to live in Rob Doyle's life. This is a story, it's a piece of autofiction about Rob the author and about him attempting to and mostly failing to write throughout the course of this book. He visits different cities. He takes on different jobs. He may or may not be Rob the person. I've said it to his face. I've said that there's absolutely no way that the Rob that's in this book and I would live the same life or live in lives that are adjacent to each other. But I'm fascinated to read about what the Rob in this life is doing. He's a fantastic writer. You know that from his fiction writing already. This isn't really fiction writing. And if you get a chance to get this, please do. I enjoyed it immensely. It came out in January, and therefore it may have been lost in all of the books of the year thing. And if not, you can listen to him on that cool new car ad that he's on at the moment that he's doing the book for. Now, where are we going? Jan, you're next.
I've just seen the comment that says, will Jan be telling funny stories like last year?
Well, I mean, we can take a pause. Everybody has one book left, so we can.
Can I do one really quickly? Because the weirdest thing in the world happened today. So I bought my house 3 years ago, and for the last 2 years, I've received a Christmas card from someone to the previous owner of the house, who was called David, and I don't know who he is, and I always throw it in the bin. This year I opened it up, and instead of the just ordinary Christmas card, it said in the front, Happy Christmas to a lovely couple. And when I opened it up inside, it said, to David and Jan. I'm not too sure if this is a mad coincidence or if I should be a bit freaked out by that.
Or if this person just keeps walking past your house and just sees you and goes, oh, David must be inside all the time. We never get to see him these days.
I know. And they're really expensive, not a packet card, but one that they've gone out and bought specially. Anyway, that's my not funny but slightly creepy Christmas story. My last
no one ever saw Jan ever again.
I know. Just if something happens to me in the next 2 days, it's a man called David. That's who you all need to be looking for.
Okay, good.
So I am going to finish with this book, and I've got 3 reasons for why I've picked this book. The first one is because it's really tiny. And if I tell you the last 2 books that I have read this year, the sum total of their pages was 1,700 pages. I am completely drawn to small books at the minute. Second reason that I've picked this is the book that I wish I had written, that I read this year. And I think a lot of us writers do that. We pick up books and think, that's such a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? It's very me. And the third reason is I have been doing a lot of research this year. I'm part of a research project at Queen's looking at how dementia is depicted in literature, and reading a lot of books about dementia and thinking really hard about how we as writers write people who can't convey their own experiences. And I was talking about that to John and No Alibis, which is our bookstore here in Belfast, our fantastic bookstore. And John recommended this because it's such a unique, really unique kind of idea. It's by a writer called Catherine Lacey, and it's called Pew, as in the kind of pews you get in churches. And it's about a person, and I'll not go any further than that. It's a person who turns up in the church in this small town in America. And it's impossible to tell whether the person is a man or a woman, whether they are, what ethnic background they're from, what class they are. They kind of look like everything, and they have chosen not to say anything. So throughout the book, Pew doesn't really speak. And what is really interesting about it is that everyone in the town begins to project their own ideas of identity onto this person. It's just such a clever wee book and a great story. And I got just so jealous reading it, going, that's such a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? But it's also given me a lot to think about in terms of when someone cannot tell their own story, how often we kind of hijack their story and make it into what we want to pull out of it. So yeah, a great read. And I am going to read some more Catherine Lacey now because I've enjoyed this so much.
Fantastic. Ronán, what's your last one?
Thanks. Yeah, for my last one, I think I had the most boring cover of the night. Which is because it's actually by Fitzcarraldo, and it's a novel. So if you buy the shops, it's going to be blue and it look like all the other books. But this was an advanced copy I got, which you can tell no expense undertaken whatsoever in terms of the design, which is as it should be. It's a book. I'll show it back. It's called I Is Another by Jan Fosse, who's a Norwegian writer, and this is the second installment of 3 books. It's technically called a septology, so it's in seven pieces, but there are three books you buy in the shops. This is the second one, and the third one is out next year. And this is really about a painter. He's in retirement age. He's a widower who lives a very simple life in a southeastern, I think, Norway. And really, apart from modest interactions with his kind of strange neighbor and with the guy who runs the gallery that he paints for, it's really a book of interiority. It's all one sentence. And I know people say North European novel, one sentence, you're all right. Maybe I'll go for one of Dan's or Sinead's books, but it's incredibly moving. And the first book, in the first few characters, there are 2 characters called Asley, one called Ailes, one called Aslick. I'm not good with names when it comes to books, and I was like, 5 characters with the letter A, forget it. But actually, the book really works, and it's one thought leads to another, and it's a very calm. And actually, the second volume is almost more spiritual. And you get a sort of sense of a guy gathering himself for the last sort of chapter of his life. That's what it feels like. And I sort of feel that when the 3 books are out, I'll probably keep them aside, and at certain times in my life return to them. They are quite meditative. They are quite calming. But the first book really stayed with me, and I sort of felt that it was almost like an undercoat. And that this is now the next coat that goes onto it. So that's why. So I Is Another by Jan Fosse. Again, not that this image helps you, but it may help you just remember that it was one of my books. When you love it and you remember who to trust in future, you remember it was me. Just one quick thing. I saw Anne Patrick in the chat asking who wrote The Fig Tree. It's Goran Vojnovic. So if you look at VOJ, so if you just look on Istros books, you'll find it.
You guys are immense multitaskers. It's really impressive. You're all looking at the comments, doing the thing. Sinead, your final book, what's going to be?
Again, another book that I think might have passed me by, other than the fact that I was judging a prize. I was judging the Desmond Elliott Prize, which is a prize for first novels, and we only had to read the 10 books and pick a shortlist of 3. And when I read this book, I knew, for me, I didn't know what the other judges, but I knew it was going to be the winner for me. It just stood out as absolutely exceptional. It's called That Reminds Me by Derek Owuso. And Derek is an English writer. His parents are Ghanaian, and the story, again, it's a novel, but I do think it's quite heavily autobiographical. And it's about his life growing up in London, experiences of, not being cared for properly, racism, class, adoring his mother, later in life getting into drinking, and just basically it's a really brilliant examination of masculinity, what it is to be male, what it is to be a young black man, discrimination. And that all sounds really, really heavy, but it's the language. He's so poetic. It's also written in very kind of short sections, as like, probably can't see that light, but lots of the chapters are often half a page, so it's quite fragmented, but it's really distilled, and it's really it's very, very lyrical. I was not at all surprised to find out that he does a lot of spoken word and a lot of kind of like rapping and stuff. So it's a lot of musicality in this book. It's also, interestingly, the publisher is Murky Books, who was set up by somebody very famous who isn't a writer, who's Stormzy. So this is Stormzy's publishing house, Murky Books, and it was a debut novel, and you'd swear this guy had written 10 books because it's so accomplished and so incredible. And the other two judges thankfully loved it as much as me, and it was our deserved winner. So yeah, Derek Owuso, That Reminds Me.
I only know that Stormzy has a press because they sent me a book the other day and I had to look up who the press was. Stormzy has a press. Who knew? Before I just go to my final one, hello, Elaine Feeney. How are you? Twice we've spoken to Elaine in one day. Loved Sarah Baum's book, Jan. Absolutely. Ashley McCarthy says, I've just finished reading Annie Ernaux's The Years. It was incredible. I love her style, intertwining autobiography with a social and political history of post-war France. And Emily Reynolds says, I just got the first John Fosse from the library based on a previous recommendation by Ronán. That's all for you tonight. Good man. Before we finish up, my final one is this. It is the incredible Sarah Crossan, and this is her first novel for adults. It's called Here is the Beehive. You may know Sarah as a YA author. She was laureate in Nanog very recently for a couple of years, but this is her first novel written for adults. It's written in the same blank verse style that she has written all of her most recent novels, which means, and again, maybe I should explain to people who have never seen that before, it is written in the form of, again, the light's not going to be my fair friend here, is it? It is written in the form of blank verses. So each of them, some of them can be individual poems in and of themselves that are immensely beautiful in the space of 4 or 5 lines. But the story is one of Anna. Anna is a solicitor. She is having an affair with a married man. She gets a phone call in her office one morning. She's had a row with the man she's having an affair with. She hasn't spoken to him in a few days. And it is that man's wife on the phone. And she wants to speak to Anna about the will, because it turns out that her husband has died. And this woman does not know who Anna is, does not know that her husband was having an affair. And Anna finds out on the telephone that the man she's been having an affair with has passed away. And then it's the story as it unfolds from there. It tells a little bit their story, about their love affair, about how they got together, about what their relationship was about. And then what Anna does to deal with her grief, whilst not being able to grieve publicly at the same time going forward. It broke my heart. It is a thing of absolute beauty. And if you get a chance, that sounds like it's the sort of thing that you might be into. Also, as well, because of the nature of the verse, nature of the way it's written, you'll have it read in about 2 hours. It's gorgeous, and the cover goes a long way as well. That's Sarah Crossan's Here is the Beehive. And that's my last one for tonight. Before we finish up, quick round the houses in terms of what everybody is doing over the next few months in 2021. Jan, start with you. What have you got you want to talk about?
I have a 10-part series beginning on Radio 4 on the 3rd of January. So 10 short stories every Sunday evening for 10 weeks. And then that will be published as a little short story collection in February called The Last Resort. So it's about a haunted caravan park on the north coast of Northern Ireland in Ballycastle. And I'm incredibly proud that as we move into the wilderness that is Brexit, there's going to be 10 weeks of 10 fantastic Northern Irish actors reading stories from Northern Ireland every week on Radio 4 for 10 weeks. So I've heard them and they're brilliant. They're really, really good.
I've been looking forward to that for a long time. And you're also going to be one of the judges next year in the International Dublin Literary Award as well. Rather you than me. That's a tough gig. Best of luck with that. Ronán, I know what yours is, but tell us about Panenka.
Yeah, I've a new book coming out in March. It's a novel called Panenka. So it's about, I suppose, people who are about life's unfixability. It's about people who've come to a point in their life where they're carrying a lot from their past and how they find some sort of path to peace through that. Jan's read it, so she's saying that's not what it's about. that's as much as I'm prepared to blurb at the moment, shall we say. But yeah, no, I've been working on it for most of this year, just on editing, and I'm sort of the final little commas just signed off the last day. So it feels like a huge change in the atmospheric pressure in my life to have that done. And it's out there. Some of the promotional proofs are out there, so a few people have read it, and so that feels like a huge step, something that really only has been in my head for the last couple of years, and only 2 or 3 people have read, is finally having a life of its own. So I every time, like, I've done music before and I've done a book before, so every time I forget what this feels like, and every time it just feels so strange. But so that's the main thing. In May, that's coming out.
And just really briefly, because my copy is downstairs and it is in my things to be read over Christmas pile, but I read the first opening page where it explains what a panenka is. Explain that to me, because it's just beautiful.
Oh, yeah, panenka, and I have, as it happens.
Sorry, right there.
Sorry, it just happened to have a copy, very reasonably priced. Well, just a proof, or maybe isn't. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a football team. It's a Panenka's football reference. It's not a football book, but it's don't not buy it because of that. Panenka. This is my definition of it anyway. In football, a penalty technique in which the taker chips the ball artfully into the center of the goal, counting on the likelihood that the goalkeeper will have dived to either side. So it's a technical term in football, but to be honest with you, writing a book with football in it is a bit of a panenka in its own right. It's a gamble that could go beautifully, or so let's see.
Okay, Ronán, fair enough. Sinead, which 4,000 things that you're doing next year do you want to tell us about?
Well, I have to have 80 books read by next month, which I'm working my way through. I'm a judge for the Rathbones Folio Prize, so I'm trying to read, but it's a great prize because it's non-fiction, fiction, poetry, short stories, history. Like, it's a real lucky dip. So I'm getting to read a load of stuff again that would have passed me by. Thankfully, I'd read a chunk of some of the things that are in the running, but I don't know how we're going to narrow it all down. It's going to be a nightmare. I got about 4 essays, one a due every month for the first 4 months. I've got a book that I'm co-editing with somebody that's out in 2022, due in, I think that's May, and I finished the draft of a book that I sent to my agent. So he likes it, and I'm just waiting for him to get back. I can't look at it now. I'm absolutely broken. I can't look at it, so I'll go back to it at some point. So yeah, busy, but all good stuff. All stuff I like. It's all stuff I'm into.
What I like is that your version of busy and my version of busy is the sort of stuff that other people will go, oh my God, what are you attempting to do in 12 months? Thank you so much to
it's
again.
It's good to be busy though.
And so they keep telling me. I couldn't have asked for 3 better people to come on and do this tonight. Thank you, my friends, for spending an hour with me and talking about books. Have a brilliant, lovely, wonderful, amazing Christmas.
Rick, can I ask a question? Can I mention that book that I was telling you about?
Something else you mentioned. Yes, do it before we finish. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an anthology, and it's a book in aid of it's a charity book. So it's called Emergence, and basically it's lots of doctors who work in gerontology, which is with older patients and around dementia, asked doctors to pick a poem and a piece of prose each, and there's like Elizabeth Strout is in here, Yeats, Heaney, Patrick Kavanagh, Plato, Oscar Wilde, the second mother essay from Constellations about my own godmother and her dementia is in here. But it's a gorgeous, lovely hardback, and 2 wonderful doctors, Shane O'Hanlon and Paul Finucane, just put it together themselves, and they're trying to raise money. So they have a website. It's emergenceanthology.com, and it's for sale, I think, in Charlie Burns and Fred Hanna's, Alan Hanna's even in Rathmines, and a couple of other bookshops. But it'd be a lovely kind of gift. Anthologies like this, where you get all sorts of stuff in it, would be lovely. And all the proceeds go towards age-related charities. So yeah, it's called Emergence.
Emergenceanthology.com is the website if people want to find it as well, if you're not near any of those bookstores. Jan Carson, Sinead Gleeson, Ronán Hession, thank you so much. Have a lovely
Thank you. Happy Christmas, everybody.
Bye. And that is it for me for tonight. Have I pressed all the right buttons? I think I pressed all the right buttons. Yes, I have. God, that was so much fun. I think we should do that again. I think we should do that again in 3 months' time. We'll all just sit down and talk more books. That was genuinely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight for the second of our events. This is just the biggest audience we've had in anything, I think, since Neil Gaiman, which is just fantastic. And thanks very much for being part of that. Tomorrow night, starting at 8 o'clock here in the Ricochet Book Club and on the Shelf Analysis YouTube channel, it's the book quiz. You can play alone, you can play with friends. We will have spot prizes on the night. That will give you the opportunity to win yourself some nice books and some nice beer. But other than that, you're just playing for fun. And we've got a bunch of questions all put together by myself and Liz over the course of the weekend. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have fun. That is tomorrow night, live at 8 o'clock. And it's not no, this is not an Irish table quiz. We're not going to start at 8:30, 8:45. It starts bang on 8 o'clock. So make sure you're with us for the first questions. Other than that, that's it. Have yourself a lovely evening, and I'll see you tomorrow night from 8. Take it easy. Good luck.